Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar from the ICG, Reframing the Role of Automation in Data Storytelling. First of all, we'd like to thank the sponsor of today's webinar, UScan, which is a social media listening platform with visual insights. You can hear more about UScan on the recording of their recent Lunch and Learn for Us, which is on our website, alongside their ad on our website. Please contact Anna Yanko on anna.yanko, Yanko, at uscan.io for more information. And don't forget to redeem your discount with them if you're an ICG member. So, and now over to today's speaker, Adam Baker. Adam brings nearly 15 years of market research experience and now leads customer success at Indico Labs, helping research agency leaders and consultants significantly reduce the time they spend on manual report automation, combining a done-with-you approach to reporting efficiency with self-service reporting software. Adam has a deep understanding of researchers' needs and
What? No sound.
is driven to solve the tough. Hand over to you.
Thanks, Lucy. I think the sound went a little bit then, but I think we've got the gist of it. I just realized I'm wearing the same shirt as I was in that picture as well. So that's symmetry. Let me just share my screen. You'll see the actual PowerPoint to begin with, but then I'll switch it over to presentation mode. There we go. Can everyone see that okay?
Thanks.
Perfect. So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you, Lucy and Catherine, for inviting me along, and thanks to the ICG. We were just talking about the summer party and the art show from last year, and I think I really love what the ICG are doing, and we were talking about some of the things that are coming up. I was actually saying I've never made it to any of the pub quizzes, so I'm hoping to get along to one of those at some point soon. I won't have met some of you before. Some of you I will have met before. Just to give you a bit of background, obviously Lucy's already given a bit of an introduction to me, but my name's Adam. I've been in the market research industry now for almost 15 years. I started out on the floor in Westfields with a clipboard, going around asking people some questions. And then I quite quickly realized that I didn't want to go and do face-to-face research and moved on to online research with YouGov. I was in their fast turnaround market research team, specializing in B2B research and then international research as well. I left YouGov in about 2017, and I actually went and did some consulting myself. I did some freelancing while I was traveling, had a lovely time going around South America and Asia while I was doing link checks and little bits and pieces for people at the same time as running some research projects and doing some marketing and graphic design. And then in 2019, an ex-colleague of mine from YouGov called me up and said, I've got something that I think you'll be interested in. You know how I was helping you to automate reports when you were in the Omnibus team? Well, I've created a tool that is researcher friendly and you can upload some data. Do you want to come and work with me? So I'll actually pop a QR code up here. If you want to scan that, you can go over to our website if you're interested in having a look. But I'm sure a link will be shared with you, or there was a link to our website from the event page as well on the ICG website. As Lucy said, what we really aim to do is to help market research agencies produce reports more efficiently. We are in the reporting space. That's kind of where we look at. Typically, we work with larger agencies, but I'm going to take some of those learnings and apply them to independents and consultants today, and then talk a little bit about how we can all reframe specifically report automation in the role of data storytelling. So what I'm going to cover today, yeah, just as I mentioned before, our space is report automation. So when I talk about automation, I'm mainly talking about reporting. Obviously, there are other parts of the research flow that you can easily report these days, but most of what I'm saying today will be framed in that space. I plan to hopefully talk for about 25 minutes, maybe less. I'd rather stick around at the end and have a bit of an open discussion about some of this stuff, specifically point 5 there in the list of the topics that we're going to go through today. So the things I want to cover today, why I believe this topic matters now, what I've seen and what's been happening over the past few years, why I think it's important even for independents to start thinking about automation now. And some of that will be down to how automation has evolved and is evolving. So we'll look at the past and the future there a little bit. And then I'll put that into context with some real world report automation use cases from some of our customers that I believe can also be applied to what you guys are doing as well. And then it wouldn't be a presentation these days without having a bit of a conversation about AI. So I will talk about AI and the things that we've explored from our point of view in terms of building software for the market research industry, some things that we've tried, but also some tips on some things that you can already be doing outside of our own solutions and those types of things as well. And I do think it's important to talk about AI at some point during this presentation, because a lot of that does roll into what this means, what I believe this means for the future of not just independent consultants, but also the broader research industry as well. And then at the end here, I also have an offer for ICG members, which I'll provide to you. I mentioned at the start, a lot of what we do is more for bigger research agencies, but I've put together a little package that hopefully makes it accessible. If you guys are interested in checking it out, there'll be a QR code at the end that you can scan. The other thing that I'm including, if you scan the QR code, you'll receive a list. I've got like a personal list that I keep of things that are interesting to people that are interesting to follow on LinkedIn in our space and are talking a lot about the future of the research industry. So I've got a long list of people to follow. There will be some podcasts that I subscribe to and some things that I read and newsletters that I subscribe to, those kind of things. So I've got that list available as well. I won't be able to see any questions if you're posing them throughout, but if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them up and we can at the end have a discussion around those. Or if you want to just have an open discussion at the end, that's possible too. There's some questions in here. If you type your answers in, that would be really helpful as well. So whenever I do a talk, which isn't that often, but when I do a talk or when I record a video for our clients or anything like that, I love to kick off any talk about automation with this really nice quote that we've got from one of our customers. We've been working with Jack from Collage Group now for over 3 years. They're a big consultancy out in the US. And when Jack came to us, they were at a point where they were exhausting resources. They were just hiring and hiring and not getting any further with that. So he kind of had this epiphany that you can either just keep growing your team endlessly so that you have thousands of people producing research, or you can get smarter about your efficiencies and how you're actually doing things. I was thinking a little bit about how this can relate to smaller businesses and even independent consultants. Well, firstly, I mean, I imagine some of you will have ambitions to grow your headcount at some point. If you do have those ambitions, I think this is something that it resonates with us as a relatively small business ourselves. We're only 10 full-time employees. Whenever we make a hire, we think first, is there something that we could be doing more efficient, or is hiring a person the best way to solve this problem? So that's one thing. And then beyond that, even without growing your headcount, I think that if you were to think about this, the way I imagine all of you probably have a ceiling on the number of projects and the number of clients you can take on at any given time. So that's something that's almost your blocker in terms of, rather than growing headcount, you're limited in the number of projects that you can do at any one time. If you're already doing 3 projects right now that are heavy and taking up a lot of your time, you're probably not starting a 4th one because you just don't have the availability to do it. So your way of looking at this is actually, can you grow your possible capacity by being smarter about the way that you're doing things? And can you unlock growth without actually having to put in significantly more hours? That's one way of looking at it. When I was thinking about this as well, I was also looking at why I think this is an important time to be talking about this. I think there have been, especially just in my time in the market research industry in the last 15 years, but even looking back at the last 2 to 3 years and the introduction of OpenAI and some of the things that are coming out there, I think there have been three significant changes in the market research industry. And this has probably been true throughout, the history of market research. This is probably always changing in this way. I think there's this flow of things that cause change within the industry. Firstly, it starts with having access to more things. So if you've got more tools and you've got more data, not only at our disposal, but in the hands of our customers too, how do you compete against, in this case, self-service tools that claim to do everything and probably really cheap for your clients? And that also comes on to the client expectations. Because they have availability of these tools and they have all of this data available to them, they are living in a world where they can pretty much get access to everything they want. And if you think about not even just the market research industry, we live in an always on culture. Even just looking back at my experience at YouGov in the omnibus team there, when I started in 2011 there, we were offering a 1,000 NatRep sample with a 48-hour turnaround, which for me was already coming straight out of university, was already quite mind-blowing that that could be possible. Within just a few years of me being there, we had already moved to a 2,000 sample within 24 hours. And then when I was leaving the company, they were looking at moving to a real-time, always-on way of just dropping questions in, collecting data, getting them back. And it wasn't just the sample and the speed that we were changing. When I started, we were just delivering data tables. When we moved to that 24-hour turnaround, we went from 48-hour turnaround just delivering data tables to a 24-hour turnaround delivering data tables and a top-line summary report, which was quite insane, but it was possible through automation at the time that we had. But it really, the point I'm trying to make is that customers are already looking to achieve more for the same amount of money or even less. So that's one thing to think about there. And that has a knock-on effect as well, I believe, to the role of the researcher. And the reason I've put researcher in speech marks here is that I actually think that you guys as independent consultants are in a really good position here. We'll come back to that as my final point of this talk. But I think the role of the researcher needs to move towards being true business consultants rather than just, designing research, collecting data, giving them back the data in a report format, maybe doing a debrief and then forgetting about it. I think really companies are going to expect and really want you to be in there telling them, okay, what data should they be focused on out of all of this data that they have access to? What tools should they be looking at or using to do this themselves? And then how should they then look at that and interpret the data? So really getting in there and advising companies at every single step of the research process, rather than doing it, having more of an advisory role as well and helping them to do it themselves, having a bit more of a done with you approach to market research. So we can come to that a bit later on and dig into that a little bit deeper. Just looking at how automation is evolving. Feel free to type your answers in the chat box, but I would challenge you to think about what types of projects you think of when you think of report automation. I'll just give a second for people to type in. I won't actually be able to see the responses, but I'll give a moment just in case anyone does want to type.
I'm just going to read out trackers,
Yeah.
quant dashboards, multi-country, large international, brand tracking of any kind. There you go.
Yeah, that was a trap. I was, I wanted people to talk about trackers. I wanted people to talk about international reports. Obviously, my guess would have been when you think about automation, you are thinking about anything where A, you already know what the report will look like, and B, you can guarantee that it will be repeated. Why is that the case? Well, it's because traditionally automation has been hard to set up. You need to either know how to code in Python, or you need to know how to use complicated tools, or you need to have a team available that know how to use these complicated tools with steep learning curves. They were clunky, slow to operate. That means that report automation has traditionally been expensive as well. We all know time is money. The tools also cost money. So if you wanted to go down the route of automating projects, then you needed to have the ability to put the time and effort in, but also pay for the tools in the first place. And then that all means that because it takes time and money to set these things up, you can't go through the setup process every single time you run a report. It only works if the report is going to stay the same each time, which is why you would have been thinking about trackers and international studies and segmentations and those types of things. This is traditional report automation, and it definitely still has its place in the industry. This isn't going away. This is still a thing. I actually have kind of a slight humble brag here. This is an email from one of our customers, Rachel. Rachel was actually one of our first customers at Indico Labs when we started back in 2019. We gave her access to one of our new tools last year, where she had planned for 3 resources to spend a month and a half building out 30 reports, 30 different individual market reports for the same project. They were actually able to use our new, at the time, new, it still exists, slide gen tool to set up the project once using a point and click interface, and then just repeat that for all of the other 30 markets. And they were able to, as you can see from her email, produce the reports in a nice leisurely 3 days rather than that initial month and a half that they had planned for. Why am I telling you this? Well, because I'm not saying that there is no longer a place for traditional automation. It definitely still works. There are definitely still projects that it relates to. I don't know whether those are the types of projects that you as individual consultants pick up, obviously, because, you know, those 30 country international projects, someone has to pay for the sample. How's that all going to work? All of those types of things. So maybe it's not really relevant to you. And as consultants, I imagine you're probably sat there thinking something like, well, actually, all of the reports that we create are bespoke. I'm never repeating anything. I'm not starting from a base every single time. I'm literally starting from scratch and thinking, how am I going to create a nice creative way of putting this to the customer? This is something that we hear all the time, especially with the challenges that we talked about earlier with client expectations and the role of the researcher. I think it's definitely a good thing. I'm not here to tell you to standardize all of your outputs in any way. This is definitely something that I would still encourage. And I think actually quite a lot of the bigger agencies probably need to do this a bit more as well, rather than just always delivering standardized outputs. But there's definitely some benefits to adding some consistency to what you're doing now. So even when you think about maybe you do want to offer bespoke solutions, absolutely fine. But if you think about something like, I don't know, just plucking something out of the air, like Van Westendorp pricing modeling, there's only really so many ways that you might want to visualize that. And you don't have to invent the wheel every time you're doing research. So if you can look at things like that you know inside out, and you can almost standardize or semi-standardize, you can create something that's repeatable. And repeatable is printable. If you've got something that can be repeated, you can set up a template and you can print it, essentially. It allows you to generate a clear offering to customers as well. So you can have a website with, these are some things that you can buy off the shelf with standardized pricing, these types of things. And if you've got a clear offering and it's repeatable and you don't have to set it up in a new way every single time, you have a way that you can charge the same amount for an output, but also do less work effectively. So increasing your ROI in this way as well. And all of these things, what we see with our bigger agencies that we work with, quite often they aren't necessarily selling too many of these standardized outputs. They're almost a gateway into talking about, oh, actually, you came to me because you wanted to talk about pricing. I offered you Van Westendorp because we have an off-the-shelf solution. But actually, through conversations, what I've found out is that you need something slightly different or bigger, and it's just a gateway into other projects. So that's something to think about. That's one thing to think about. But even in pure bespoke report automation can help with storytelling. And that's where I want to kind of start to rethink a little bit more the role of automation. If you think about how you currently uncover stories in data, I imagine that most of you are using something like SPSS or are receiving data tables. And then you probably go through the data and you're finding interesting things out. Maybe you're digging a little deeper while you're planning your outputs, creating a storyboard, and then putting that into presentation, and taking time over actually planning out how it's going to look once you've received the data. But what if you could quickly and easily see everything in chart format? Report automation doesn't have to mean creating the final deliverable. And that's what I'm really talking about here when I'm saying rethink the role of automation. So instead of thinking of automation as that final deliverable, it can actually be used to help visual thinkers to explore the data in charts rather than looking at these streams and streams of data tables that you might be used to looking at. It will help you to uncover narratives quicker at the same time as giving you a starting point for your report. So maybe if you use a system like this where you can upload your data tables and it generates a bunch of charts for you, some of those might end up in your report, some of those might not, but it doesn't really matter either way because really you're using it to find the story rather than to deliver the story. I should say there are other solutions available as well for this. There are ways of doing this that don't involve just us. So there are resources that you can go and look for automation as well. Yeah, so that's just another thing to think about there. The other part that I wanted to kind of stress here is that it can be used to help have a starting point to talk about with your customers. So you can actually, if it takes just like in this example, 30 seconds to actually upload it into a platform, you could even have a session with your customer where before you even start the report, you can upload it into an automation solution like this. And you can go through it with your customer, talk around the data with your customer, and start to build out the structure of the report within a solution like this. You might actually find that what you thought was interesting to them is kind of a sub-narrative, and they're actually interested in digging in a different direction. And that can also actually become an interim deliverable that helps you stand out, right? What you're seeing here is the start point of something that we call dashbox. So if you did use this to talk to your customers, once you finish that call with your customer, you can very quickly just send them the link to this and they can go in and they can start fiddling around with that as well. So it's a nice way of giving them something as an interim deliverable rather than just throwing it away at the end of that conversation. And then you've probably all heard of the 80-20 rule. Flip that on its head. If you think about this as a 20-80 rule, or even if you only keep 99% of it, who cares really? Because you haven't wasted any time. It hasn't taken you any time to do it. Some of this might go into your presentation, but you've used this as a way. It's actually saved you time. It's provided extra context to your customer. You've had an additional talking point with your customer. It's helped you uncover narratives. It's helped you look at data and uncover a story that you may have missed if you were just looking at data tables or using something like SPSS to explore the raw data. So when I talk about rethinking the role of automation, we're really looking at using automation to be a discovery tool rather than a deliverable. I'm just going to jump into some real life examples as well, just to give you a bit of an overview, tell a couple of stories about how some of our customers are using this. We work quite closely. We've got a really good partnership with a German company called Opinio. They are a self-service market research tool. Actually, it's a very neat tool as well for for you guys if you were looking for a self-service solution. I think you would potentially be interested in having a look at Opinio. They also offer service-based solutions, so they have researchers who can do the research for you using their software. And they came to us a few years back now with a really, really nice looking slide library of ways that they could interpret the data and how they might look at sharing the data with their customers. They obviously didn't want to go through the process of manually creating those every single time because they might not use all of those reports. So what we did for them is we created a solution that we call Flex Automation. And every single time they run a project, their questions have little codes in them that talk to our automation solution and essentially allow us to know which of the slides we should be using to populate with data straight from their data into the PowerPoint and then give that to them as a starting point for their reports. So this is kind of what you were seeing in that GIF that was repeating as I was talking on the last slide, but a bit more extreme in that it's already in their custom template with all of their designs exactly as they want it. It's not all starting as the same bar chart. Some of them might be visualized in specific ways based on what the question type was. And every single time they run a project, they can send us the data and we send them back the slides that correlate to those questions that have been asked. And again, they might chuck away 80% of that. They might remove 80% of that from the report entirely, but they haven't had to go through the process of manually creating it in the first place. And then they don't have to worry about whether anything's incorrect or anything like that, because they haven't been copying and pasting data at all. It's just been populated as a starting point. And then they will go through and build that out into a deeper report for their customers. So that's a classic case of using automation as a starting point rather than an end point for their researchers. Another example is that we work with a company in the US called DQ&A. They specialize in diabetes research. This is Tracy. We work with Tracy a lot as well. They use that tool that you were just seeing in the GIF that was going around and around. They love using that Dashbox tool for uncovering narratives. And they actually use that process that I was talking about earlier, where they will sit with their customers and look at the data together before they begin delivering the report. And they used to deliver appendix sections with all of their reports. So they would have all of their demographics. They would chart everything against everything every single time. And it would take them days to create those charts, which maybe people look at, maybe they don't look at. They thought, okay, this is a waste of time. What if we use this Dashbox tool that we use to explore the data with our customer and actually deliver that to the customer as well? And the customers find it really easy to work with. They just get a link, they open it up, and they can go to any question from the survey, and they can go and look at any cut of the data from their crosstabs. This is definitely something that I could see you guys benefiting from. It's kind of relates more closely to how I see the role of the researcher changing as well, having additional touch points where you can talk to the customer and have a talking point that can be used with the customer. I think that's quite an important development that's coming, especially with the introduction of AI as well. And on that note, here is my something about AI slide, because we all need one. So AI, I think, is a long way, well, I really hope it's a long way off producing in-depth reports that are produced by highly skilled consultants or researchers like yourselves. I'll talk a little bit about what we've been exploring in this space. There are two main things that we've been looking at. So firstly is narratives, pulling out narratives from the data. So, okay, you're visualizing the data in a certain way on a slide. If you wanted to say something about that data, can you use AI to generate a kind of top line overview of what that data would look like? And then secondly is creating top line reports off of the data and using AI to determine, okay, the past few times you've done it, you've visualized this type of chart in this way. So I can kind of assume that that's how you're going to do it again. So kind of a smarter look at that Opinio workflow, where rather than it being fixed and rigid that this type of question is going to be visualized in this way, actually the AI could be used to make recommendations of how it could be visualized and make recommendations on how you might be able to look into some other things that could be visualized and other potential narratives and routes of storytelling as well. When we've looked at doing these things and when we're exploring these things, we're really, really careful that we only ever want to talk about these things as assistants, or I think that's like a common way of looking at these things. I think the common term that you see floating around is agents, right? But I would rather think of these as assistants that you have as a starting point to talk to and help you to uncover those narratives. I think the final output and the final discussion piece still comes from interpreting it as a researcher and deciding which pieces go into a report as well. I'd say there are already some things that you can start to do, even just using things like Copilot built into PowerPoint, or even just using ChatGPT. If you aren't already, I would recommend finding out how to do some of these things, like using ChatGPT or Copilot to help you summarize a report before you even start writing a summary yourself. Or maybe it's another piece of research, a secondary piece of research that you're looking to incorporate. Rather than reading the entire thing, you can use these things to kind of help you pull out some summaries and point you to certain things of interest. And writing and rewriting commentary, if you've got writer's block, rather than sitting there with writer's block, using it to generate ideas rather than the final output is always really, really useful as well. I guess all I'm trying to say in this section is not to be scared of AI. And actually, if you haven't already, start to seek out courses, knowledge, learning, if only so that when you're talking to customers, you're able to advise them on some of these useful tools and some of these useful ways of working with AI, the types of things that they might want to avoid, how they can get started, all of those types of things that a customer might be concerned about. As a consultant, how can you advise them around those types of things? Because if they aren't already talking to you about how they can introduce AI into their workflows, they will be very soon talking to you about how you can introduce AI to market research. That's a given. And I guess as consultants as well, I would say you can stay ahead of bigger agencies by taking advantage of your freedom to shop around and your freedom to go and talk to a lot of different tools. When you are in a much bigger agency, I'm sure some of you come from larger agencies as well, there is a tendency to try and keep things in-house and build in-house. So some of those will be blocked off from going and looking at other things that are available. You have complete autonomy and complete freedom to go and try everything. And actually in that list, there's something called insights platforms, which I'm sure some of you already look at insight platforms, but they send a weekly email with a list of updated tools and platforms that have come out. A lot of them are kind of similar that are coming out these days that are talking about AI, but it's definitely still worth keeping an eye on what is available, getting demos, watching videos, all of those types of things, keeping an eye on what you can introduce to your workflows as well as what you can recommend to customers. And I actually did want to mention something about AI, even though I'm kind of joking around a little bit with my slide here, because I do think that it's something that I'm quite passionate about in terms of what that means for the future of the market research role. And this is what I mean by saying that I feel like you as independent consultants are in a really good position here. I believe that the role of the researcher has to become more consultative. I said that at the beginning. Humans working directly with humans. And that's where you'll stand out. I've got a LinkedIn post up here that was posted by Shifra just last week, and this really backs up my thinking as well. I don't know whether any of you know Shifra, but she's one of the prominent people on LinkedIn that are in my list of people to follow, always sparking really interesting discussions. She posted last week to start talking about how she was specifically actually talking about self-service tools and what self-service tools are available and what that might mean for the role of the researcher. But I think it applies to automation and AI as well, in that you can't stop AI, you can't stop automation, and you can't stop people from doing things themselves. But I think in nearly all spaces around human life, human interaction becomes 100 times more valuable than just going it alone and using these tools. And that's what I mean when I say that you guys are in the best position. You're in a really good position to be helpful. You're in a really good position to talk more to your customers. You're in a really good position to share more knowledge with your customers. And by all means, bringing this back to automation and report production, automate production of 100 slides rather than spending a week writing a detailed report. If it means that you can spend half a day sitting with your customer and helping them to understand their data. That's what it really comes back to for me. And I think that's going to be the future of market research. A consultant is a professional who provides expert advice and support for organizations or individuals in a specific area of expertise. That is you guys. That is the role of the researcher in the future. There's going to be all of these data, all of this data, all of these tools available. But without someone who knows how to use them and knows when you should be looking at what data and taking note of certain things, it's going to become increasingly difficult for our customers and end clients to navigate that world on their own, I believe. I'd love to have a deeper discussion about that, because I'm sure a lot of you have your own opinions on those things as well. Lastly, yeah, this is the QR code. If you would like to scan this QR code, it will give you access to the offer that I've put together for you guys. As I said before, we typically work with larger agencies. What I've created for you is a pay monthly offer with access to our tools if you're interested in giving those a go. There's videos in there of how they all work, but I'm happy to do demos, all of those types of things as well. You'll also get access to that list that I spoke about as well. I think just for that list, then it's worth scanning this code, because there's some good things there. And then hopefully
It works.
it works. Nice. That's good. And I just wanted to say as well, I'm at Quirks next week on stand Mini E. So if any of you are going to Quirks, I'd love to meet people in person. So please come over and say hi. And then maybe smaller scale as well. I'm at I'll be going to ASC conference on working more efficiently, effectively. So I'll be going to that, which I think is in a couple of weeks as well. So if anyone's going to any of those, please come over and say hi. Please tell me whether you agree or disagree with anything that you're saying. I would love to have conversations about any of this stuff. So yeah, thanks very much for listening, and I'm happy to stick around and chat a bit more.
Thanks, Adam. We haven't got any questions in the chat, but it's a relatively small group. So does anybody have any questions? Please just ask. Kath.
I've got a question which is sort of a comment, and it's, do you agree with me? One of those leading questions.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not supposed to ask, but well, there's two thoughts. One thought I had was the cynical me, which is a lot of what you're offering, I could see works really well for customers who wouldn't need us necessarily. But then my follow-up thought to that was, I suppose, going through your thought around consultants, what I see us being able to offer is what I would almost call danger in the data. So if you have an almost automated way of collecting the data and then an almost automated way of reporting the data, without somebody who knows what to look for, you might end up with dodgy data that looks very plausible. I can see Jonna nodding with me. So I suppose one of my thoughts is, I love the idea of your offer being a play thing where you can look at the data and play around and explore. And that's where I wonder whether the role of the consultant comes in, that you can't just leave everything to automation. Sorry, there is a sort of a question. Do you agree with me? I'd love to open that up to everybody else as well.
No, I get it. I'm sure other people will have an opinion on this as well. But I guess the way that I see automation and the future of the role of the researcher or the consultant is specifically that, right? Like, you're not going to stop people from doing as much as they can themselves. I think that's part of the way that the research industry is going. But that's the role of the independent consultant or the researcher, is to be there to help the customer actually understand. I don't know how that will work with how you charge for your time and those types of things. Obviously, it's especially for bigger agencies, but being there to advise on having conversations and spending more human one-to-one time going, okay, I've had a look at this thing and this is my interpretation of it. Am I thinking about it the right way? And using the consultant to be able to go, actually, you're interpreting that in a slightly incorrect way, or that data's a bit dodgy, or this is an alternative way of looking at it. And here's a chart that we can look at together very quickly and easily. You know, having that freeing everyone up to have more time to have these conversations is what it's all about for me. Whether or not people will do that, I think that's the question, right? Is, if you've got more time, are you going to use that time to go and sit with your customer? Some people know, but the ones that do, I think, are the ones that are going to build really long-lasting relationships, really valuable service, and kind of stand out amongst competitors as well.
It makes our challenge to be telling people a bit that they don't around, you don't know what you don't know, and us kind of pointing out, oh, but, and that can put consultants in an uncomfortable space, because it means we're kind of telling people, you're doing it wrong, you need to do it better. And that's a challenge for us, isn't it, to think about how do we demonstrate our expertise and the value that we can bring by really understanding data. Yona, you're on mute. Or I can't hear you. I can't see the mute necessarily.
Yeah, it doesn't look like you're on mute,
Yeah.
but it's...
Is that any better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, sorry. Yeah, I was smiling and nodding because I've had pretty much exactly this scenario that you're describing here, in terms of just looking at what gets spat out from automation and then not interpreting and so on. Literally, I was on a call with a client yesterday and they've commissioned me to do the thinking work on 4 projects that they've just done. I can't obviously give too much detail, but I sat in with the client and the party that had delivered this data yesterday in a meeting, and it was a really uncomfortable conversation, as you say, Kath, because I'm looking at what's come out, very brief sketch in the first instance, and immediately, as a researcher and as somebody who's used to interrogating data and really digging, I'm kind of going, you reached the wrong conclusion there, and you haven't looked into whether you know, but to have those conversations either with the clients or with, you know, a third party agency is, I found it really difficult not to come across as being condescending or not to come across as being critical, because everybody else in the call thought it was all brilliant and all they wanted me to do was to sort of kind of dig around a little bit more. But when I saw what they'd done, it was so far away from what we should do. But all of that said, Adam, I think, you know, what you've described there is getting rid of what I'd call the grunt work. So that kind of visual thinker bit, the bit around, you know, having all of your Excel data tables charted, so your first cut through isn't sort of, you know, magnifying glass in front of your eye and whatever, that you can easily see. I think that's really valuable. But we mustn't lose then that, as you say, the opportunity to use that time to actually interrogate and think and determine what it actually means.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as well, I mean, those conversations are never not going to be uncomfortable. That's a weird way of saying it. They're always going to be uncomfortable, right? But actually, the customers that listen to you, they might get annoyed like straight away, but once they come round to your way of thinking, or once they explore once you've explained to them why you're thinking that certain way, I think when they start to trust you and start to know you as you're their consultant and you're their kind of go-to expert on this piece, and they should listen to you and have a conversation with you around this. I think they would find that much more valuable than just, putting together another piece of research off the back of their assumptions. If you're challenging them, I think long term it adds value, and it adds, I don't know, maybe in real life experience you might say that this is wrong, but I would say that they would respect you a lot more and have a much better relationship with you and trust you a lot more if you are willing to challenge some of their thinking. That doesn't make it easier, but that's definitely something that we have to do as well, right? Like all the time I'm talking to people where they're telling me that they want things to be done quicker, but can they automate or whatever? And I'll go in and I'll look at their setup, and I'll tell them, the way that we do it now is we actually have positioned ourselves as more of a consultant in the way that we go and automate projects for our customers. And that involves the first step of everything that we do when we sell people onto our program, is we start by performing an audit with them, and we look at everything that they're already doing, and we basically have to tell them in a nice way where they're going wrong. And it's uncomfortable, right? It's a difficult way to start, but we always frame that with, this is where we think that you're going wrong, this is where we think you can make changes, and this is the impact that we believe it will have. And that's, I guess, what you're doing as well, just in a full service capacity rather than just the reporting element.
That's brilliant. Any other questions?
Well, I'd just like to throw in, I think what you've outlined is fantastic. Having been pilloried back in 1986 for producing identical reporting and presentation of data for salesmen, 13,000 characteristics across 10,000 different target markets to choose from. People said, oh, so you're going to produce the same thing every time, are you? I go, well, no, every story is different. The format's the same, the book looks the same, but the story's different. And I just throw in that I think us researchers, we're kind of too polite to the client sometimes. We don't want to say you're doing it wrong, but I think we've got to. And if we aren't at the helm, the AI helm going forward, it's going to happen. And if we're not at the helm, somebody else who knows absolutely nothing will be. And that's when our trouble will really start. Now, for me, it's not going to matter because I'm so old now anyway. But for the younger people, it's really serious that you have people driving the racing car, the high-powered tuned vehicle that AI will offer. These people, us, we've got to know what we're doing. And if we do know and we practice now, we will be in charge later. At the moment, we do see it as a threat because it's all so quick and easy. And the argument is, if it's all so quick and easy, why are you charging me so much? And what am I going to do for the rest of my day? And that's what people have got to sort out, how they allocate their time into doing more that's more useful and cutting through all the garbage that we've all waded through hours into the night to the following morning to try and find what the story is. And if it's done automatically, we've got it. Thumbnails. Read the thumbnail in the taxi on the way to the meeting. No preparation necessary. To me, it's a no-brainer. Sorry.
No, thank you, Mike. That's great.
Passionate. I apologise.
Oh, never apologise for passion. Any other questions? I've got one quick one. Lucy, is that okay? Do we have time for it? Or have we Okay. What I wondered, Adam, was about what I might think of as the flattening world. How do you make sure that the data is always interesting? So is your organisation or other competitors able to produce new ways of presenting data or new ways of telling the story, or is that now quite standardised?
A lot of what we do is just making use of the standard charts and tables that are available within PowerPoint.
All you need.
Sorry, go on, Mike.
No, I was going to say it's all you need.
Yeah,
The
as a starting
fundamental
point.
way of looking, it's the same.
Yeah, as a starting point for sure. And that's kind of what we're talking about as well. It's like if you if you want to make something look nicer and make something stand out more, then getting the data into a chart in the first part is the hard part. So if that's a bar chart, fine. And then change it from there. That's totally fine. That's what I'm kind of talking about as automation and AI being a tool for starting the project and working on the project rather than producing the final deliverable. And I think that's totally fine. I also think people shouldn't be scared to say that the data isn't interesting. I think that's another thing as well. I think like it's too often we will try and kind of pull something out when actually, you do have to talk about whether if you're doing like a wave on wave and there's been a significant difference, then pointing that out and coming up with some reasons why is going to be something that you do. But sometimes they're really you've just basically proved that their hypothesis is correct or they're incorrect, and the interesting part is what's next. What do you do now that you've found out that the data that you've got tells you exactly what you thought, what you thought you know, and now what do you do with it next? That's the interesting part, I believe.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's wonderful. Okay.
Could I just ask say one other thing that might be worth? I so remember people saying that chart isn't very interesting. And that led to a sort of faddishness about what the chart was, hence the phrase death by PowerPoint. The bar on the right is bigger than the bar on the left, which means that ... fill in the blank. No need to produce a spider's web, which is faddish at was faddish at the time, or a different type of style of chart, which actually I found obfuscated the message underlying, 8 charts better than 1 chart with it all on. And if the story evolved a bit like a book, it took 220 pages to get through the story. You could read quickly, you couldn't condense it all. And I think infographics, for argument's sake, a single way of representing absolutely everything in one go, put it on a single sheet of paper syndrome, actually prevents the story being told and evolving. And I think that's where we as craftspeople we're in charge of the narrative, because we can look at the beginning, the middle and the end and see where it's going. That's the skill base, surely, that we've got. We've got the charts, we're at the helm. That surely is the key.
Thank you. Point made. Brilliant. Okay, so Adam, thank you. Lucy, are you going to wrap us up?
Yeah. Me too, Adam. It was great. Thank you all for coming as well. And we'll circulate the recording. We'll put it on the website. That's okay, Adam, yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to chat to me as well outside of this, feel free to reach out or come and see me as well.
Great stuff. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.